topic, innovation in the maritime sector, we call Jorge from Saconsult, Portugal.
Morning, it's a pleasure to be here. It's a pleasure to follow an uplifting speech by Valentina. I think we need a bit of good news and hope to be able to look at the future with good perspectives. I was asked to talk about innovation in the maritime sector, and I see a couple of pictures are missing. I sent this on PDF, and I guess it didn't come quite through, but I can happily, I can try to describe it. Essentially, we have an image here of innovation in the shipping sector, past, present, and future. And I'm going to talk particularly about the future. But I think it's useful to give examples of where we came from, okay, in terms of the development of this sector, the maritime sector. And the first one, some of you may have come across this ship called the steamship Archimedes. It was the first ship that used a screw propeller. We're talking 1839, so 19th century, and this was a huge revolution. Also coincided with the transition from sailing ships, sailing power, wind power, to steam power. So this was really an historical moment in terms of the evolution of the market. And funny enough, right now we're looking again at wind as a source of power for modern ships. You know that there are several projects going on in which wind is being used to either through sails or through a rotor using the so-called Magnus effect to complement the power of a ship, the mechanical power. So it's quite curious that is having a comeback. The second one is a name you all should know. If you don't, you should keep in your mind. Is Malcolm McLean is the man who revolutionized the shipping industry and the economy in general with two revolutions. The first one was the introduction of the first container ship called IDLX in 1956, and the second one was the introduction later on in 1982 of the first round-the-world service, utilizing very large ships and then transshipping the cargo to distribute it to smaller ports, which is nowadays the model that is used by all the global operators, as you know. Curiously enough, he was very lucky when he introduced the containers because it coincided with the beginning of the involvement of US in the Vietnamese War. So it was the part of defense of the United States that proves the worth of the containers, because most of the people in the business thought this was completely crazy. Mr. McLean is a man that came from the trucking industry, he knew nothing about shipping. So people thought the guy didn't know what he was talking about. And he was lucky. He was lucky. Vietnam really helped him prove the concept, and at the end of the 1960s, every liner company was using or owning container ships. The second one was unlucky. He built the biggest ships in the world that could, at the time, that could cross the Panama Canal, which was about 6,000 TEUs. And the ships were built in Korea. They started operating in 1982, and it was a huge commercial success. But then the world coming into a very, very deep recession. The ships are being bought, ships and the containers are being bought with 100% financing by a group of the 6 largest banks in the United States. And Mr. McLean asked him for a moratorium until the crisis could pass. The bank said, okay, on the condition that we put a representative of the banks in the board of directors in the company that was called US Lines. And for him, this was an insult, so he decided to bankrupt the company. So that was the end of the second revolution that he didn't carry out completely, but was followed by every major global operators. The next innovation that has had a huge impact, not only in shipping, but also in the economy in general, was the introduction of the first ship that carries natural gas. Now, natural gas is a very, very low density gas, and in order to carry it, you have to make it liquefied, and you have to compress it by about 600 times, okay? And you cannot do it by pressure because it used to be a huge threat, and any failure will result in an explosion. So it's done by making liquid. You liquefy it to the boiling temperature of minus 161 degrees centigrade. And you know that when you bring the temperature down to such an extent, that the steel and all the material becomes very, very brittle. So it's from an engineering point of view, this is a huge challenge which was finally overcome in 1959 with the development of this first ship, the Maritime Pioneer. Now, I've had some luck in my life, I must say. And part of my luck was that I worked with the naval architect firm called J.J. Henry that designed both the Ideal X and also the Maritime Pioneer. So I was part of the team with the people that were involved in this project. For me, this was really an eye-opening experience. And then later on, I was invited by Mr. McLean to take part in the construction of new ships for the round-the-world service. So this was part of my stay in the United States. Then the next two pictures that you have to imagine were more recent innovations. One of them with a company that you normally don't associate with shipping, which is Amazon. You know, the Amazon is an incredibly innovative company. They started as a bookseller, then they started getting involved in all kinds of markets. And each time they enter a market, they just turn it upside down. They made it much more efficient, and they made it much more competitive. And in 2016, they decided to become ship operators, to operate ships without having ships. What's called NVOCC, non-vessel operating common carrier. In other words, they basically buy or rent space in existing ships, and because they have such a strong negotiating power, basically then they can offer the space in the ships as a normal ship owner. And this revolutionized once more the industry, because suddenly you start getting the entire value chain integrated and much more efficient. And this had a very big impact because all the big maritime operators like Maersk, MSC, CGM follow the same path. So nowadays, if you read the news, you'll see that MSC is buying an airline company or CGM is buying a logistics operator. So this trend started basically in 2016 with this idea of becoming as integrated as possible, and then completely you have to essentially do it on the same footing. The next slide, which I think, hopefully, there's another one that shows it later, is a project that we are involved in CINIT, which has to do also with the logistic integration. Among the other things, I have several hats. One of them, I'm the president of the CINIT Port and Logistics Community, which is an association of all the stakeholders that have anything to do with the Port of CINIT, both private and public. And we are involved in a European Union project with some 30 other companies, which objective is simply to use existing technology and emerging technology to make all the logistic change in Europe, the transport network, the European transport network more efficient. And we're contributing to something that we should all be proud of, that Valentina mentioned, which is the single logistic window, in which basically you get rid of all the paperwork and everything is done electronically. And this is more advanced than anything else that I've seen in Europe, and this is our contribution to this project. Thanks for planning. Then the last one is the future. We'll talk a little bit about it. Actually, it's a picture from a site from an equipment, port equipment supplier called Kalmar, a Finnish supplier, and they have a project they call Ports 2060. And this is what they see happening in the future with the development of something that is very much on the table nowadays. That's called the physical internet, if you have heard about it. If we have a minute, we'll talk about it. All right. So we have pictures on the other ones. All right. So I would say to simplify a little bit the main drivers, what's happening now in terms of innovation, the motivation for the innovation. One is transversal, that's affected the entire economy, or the entire social structure, which is a digital transition. In fact, that we have such fantastic progress in terms of technology that is changing the way we conduct our lives, we conduct our business, and so on. So that is a huge effect, as you know. The other one is the climate change, the recognition that we have to do something so that we don't destroy the planet. And this is receiving a lot of attention, both from public entities, international organizations, as well from private initiatives. And we can quickly look at what's happening. The third one is what I just mentioned, the fact that every operator, every major operator, global operator, is trying to become a sort of Federal Express of the maritime transport that will offer a one-stop shopping from origin to destiny. And the last one is geopolitical factor, which unfortunately is in the mind of all of us. I don't need to tell you about it, but it's affecting certainly the way the world works, and obviously also the shipping world. Let me see if I skip something. The digital transition, I'm not going to spend too much time. You know a lot about it. Marcel, unfortunately, I didn't attend the previous presentation, but I know Marcel, and he's a technology guru, and I'm sure that he covered this topic with much more competence than I could do it, but it's affecting actually the way the market is working, for sure. Regarding climate change, I mentioned to you that there's some public decisions to try to make this planet livable by the end of the century. You have the kickstart was in 2015 with this UN-sponsored meeting, the COP21, that set as a target to keep the heating, the warming of the globe below 2 degrees centigrade, hopefully less than 1.5 degrees centigrade. And if you read what's being written by people who study, you'll know that none of them is going to be possible. Let's face it. So what we can do is to see how much can we reduce the impact of this global warming. IMO, which, as you know, is the organization that regulates to a large extent the way the shipping market works, has put some targets, and some targets that in general are considered not sufficient for the objective of the Paris Agreement. And then we have the European Union. The European Union, in fact, worldwide, the organization has taken a much harder stance to try to, in fact, reduce the impact of global warming. They have this program called Fit for 55. Well, the objective is that by 2050, Europe will be carbon neutral, and that by 2030, so it's not very far away, that will reduce by 55% the greenhouse effect. So this is a huge, huge challenge, and many people don't think it's possible. But I think not more interesting, but probably more effective is the initiatives from private enterprise to really take in their hands the changes that are necessary to make. One of them is from the banking sector, and shipping depends a lot on funding from the banking. Nobody buys a ship with 100% cash. And a group of the largest banks decided to set up some rules, basically ESG rules, okay, that they considered the basis for lending money for ships. So this is pretty clear now the distinction between the companies that have ships that are climate friendly, let's call it, and the others. And slowly this is going to be a big push to improve the quality of the ships. The other two initiatives, again, private initiatives, to get into zero pollution is an initiative of cargo owners and ship owners, so that by 2030 there'll be carbon neutral ships being deployed. So it was 2030, you'll only have carbon neutral ships being put into the market. Okay? The other one, probably one with sharper teeth, let's say, it's called COZEV, Cargo Owners for Zero Emission Vessels. It's formed by all the large shippers in the world, like Amazon and Procter & Gamble and IKEA. They decided that from 2040, we will not use ships that are not carbon neutral. And in this business, who wants the cargo is the king. So they will be the ones that are really going to be forcing the change. All right. So all this is happening now, and quite often we see more news about it in the papers. Now we are already seeing some examples of this movement towards so-called green shipping. First of all, as you know, there's a lot of attention nowadays, partly because of the European Union rules, towards developing renewable fuels to replace the classical hydrocarbons, HFO and MGO. Nobody knows which ones in the end will be the ones that will be commercially competitive. What I can tell you is that one of the largest companies in the world, for many years the largest in the world, Maersk, that now is number 3 in the world, is betting very, very heavily on methanol, green methanol. So they ordered initially 8 ships, container ships, then 4 more, and I just read 2 days ago that they're ordering 7 more ships with methanol. So they'll basically putting down the track that's going to happen. But there are other alternative fuels that are being investigated. Hydrogen, of course, is the ultimate source of power. The problem is how can you put in a ship that doesn't occupy too much space. And in the meantime, LNG is a good intermediate step towards reducing the greenhouse effects. Okay. So many of the ships I just read recently, that more than 60% of the ships that were ordered this year have a dual fuel capacity in which LNG is the main fuel that will be burned. And you have already some examples. This one is from 2020 from a Norwegian company called Yard. That has one ship that is completely electrical and without any crew. So unmanned, and fully electric. So that can show that in terms of technology, there's nothing that you need to discover. It's just a question of slowly gaining some credibility and tracking the future, right? Physical internet. This is something you're going to hear a lot about if you haven't heard yet. But the concept is the same thing of your internet, the data internet. As you know, the data internet, what you do, you divide a message of the data you want to send into small packs. You send it by whatever channel is available, some communication channels available. Then at the end, you put it all together and you deliver to the desk. That's how the internet works, right? So the idea is to do the same thing with physical goods, is to divide up the physical goods in small packs, so in small containers, and then find the most efficient way to take those packs closer to the final destination and put them together and deliver. It sounds like science fiction, but in fact, it's already being tried in some pilots, and if it is successful, this will revolutionize the market completely. You know, this container ship, as we know it, will have to adapt themselves to the different types of containers, much smaller containers. And when we talk about innovation, I didn't know I had this slide actually, but since I have it, I'll talk about it. As you know, there is a very, very generous program of funds from the European Union, the PRR for reparation and resilience, that supports or funds innovative projects that use technology that is not fully developed, that can be then over time turning into commercial products. So the Port Authority of Sines, APS, led a project that was one of the projects that has been selected under this PRR program. That involves something like 35 companies from all sectors of the logistic chain, with the intention of developing something like 20 different services and products, all innovative products. Some of them will be commercial viable, others will not be commercial viable. But this is a fantastic ecosystem for innovation, because essentially you have a group of companies with all different types of technologies and interests and vocation that will get together and try to find ways to make the supply chains more efficient. So we'll see how it works. It has to work in a fairly short time span, because the PRR, I think, forces you to do it in 2 years. So this is something that is going to make, I'm sure, some noise in the press. And finally, this is the Kalmar ports I told you about. I mean, if their vision, if the physical internet trend that I told you about, it goes ahead, this is what the port in the future might look like. You don't see any big ships any longer. It's a completely intermodal. And in fact, I should mention, if you don't know, that Marlow was involved in an award-winning project sponsored by the European Union for the physical internet. They don't call it that; they call it the mixed move and match for trucks, because trucks, about 60% of the space in the trucks are wasted. Those trucks don't have always cargo from and to the same spots. So they developed this platform that is functioning and is being used commercially. That what it does is exactly that. To find out which packages are there available to go from point A to B, which trucks are available. There are hundreds of thousands available, and they're able to match it in routes where you can take advantage of the available time. And this is the future. We know it's going to happen. I don't know which shape. I think technology is going to happen. It's going to help. But clearly, this is something we have to keep our eyes on. Geopolitical facts, I don't have to tell you. I mean, you know as much as I do. But what is happening in Ukraine with Russia is disrupting completely the market. One of disruption will be hard get back to where it was before, which is the question of the energy, the fact that Europe is overly dependent from Russia for energy, both crude oil, LNG, natural gas, pardon, and coal. And the natural gas is the one that's more difficult to replace because the natural gas from Russia comes from pipeline. And the only way you can get from other sources by liquefying it and bringing ships, which is much more complicated, much more expensive. But as you know, there's a lot of attention right now to find alternatives to bring natural gas by ship to Europe. And Sinj is one of the gateways that is being looked at because there are not enough terminals in Europe to receive LNG ships. And there won't be in the near future because LNG's life is more or less temporary. So it doesn't make sense to build LNG terminals for 30, 40 years when LNG is not going to be around maybe for such a long time. This is why it's important to use the LNG terminals that exist today. Interestingly enough, the Iberian Peninsula is where you have the most concentrated LNG terminals. Mostly in Spain, there are 6, actually 7, there were 6, and now they open up to 7 again, and one in Portugal. So very likely we'll take a part in this LNG supply field. And the other one is grain. Even though Russia and Ukraine are relatively small players in terms of the global GDP, they are major exporters of grain. And this has disrupted the market. And as you might imagine, now you have to go to other origins that are further away. So the freight rates have gone up, and there's not enough capacity because this uses more ton miles. And this is a disruption that is evident in our eyes. That all these geopolitical factors, one or the other, is going to be determine the future, and it's unpredictable. Nobody knows. All right. And with this note of unpredictability, I wish you to think about what innovations you can get. Right? Thank you.
For the topic, learning experiences, we call Manuel Batista from